All right, good morning, Year 11. Sorry I could not be there with you this morning, but here I am via video to give you today's lesson. We're going to be looking at something today that I'm calling using the equation backwards. It's going to kind of be a combination of what we've done over our last couple of lessons. You're going to be still substituting values into the equations, but for example, if I had given you this formula before, I would have given you the value of r to substitute in. However, today, what I'm going to be doing is giving you the value of a and asking you to tell me the value of r. So it means what we're going to do is we're going to still substitute into equations, but we're also going to then have to use our skills we did in our previous lesson to solve for a different pronumeral. We won't just be given numbers nicely that you can just plug everything over here and then get out the answer for A. We're going to skip over these. If you want to have a go at just brushing up on your substitution, you can quickly do these examples, pause here. But I'm just going to jump straight in and show you what we're working on today. Here is an equation. Oops, cutting off there. Okay. Where we are given the value of D and we're asked to find T. So when I substitute that in, I am left with this equation. And you might look at that and think, great, I know how to solve that. I just need to get T by itself. And if that's the case, go for it. I'm going to quickly just show you what we would do here. We have a times by 5, so we're going to divide by 5. But we've got to do that on both sides. That equals 40. I've still got this T squared, and we remember the opposite operation, the thing that we need to do to get rid of that squared is the square root. We're asked to answer to 2 decimal places, so we are going to actually put this in our calculator and get the number out. T equals, remember when we're putting stuff like this from our calculator that we intend to round, we're going to put in a few extra decimals first, and then we're going to round it off. And there we go. We've got the answer to this question. We substituted in values, and that created an equation that we had to solve. Can I get you guys to do this one with me? We're given an equation, the formula for the area of a parallelogram, base times height. We're given what the area is, and we're given what the base is. And we need to find the height of the parallelogram. So we're going to substitute in our values first. 6 times h. We have now created an equation for ourselves to solve. This is quite an easy one to solve. I expect we can all do this by now. And we get h equals 11 centimeters. A lot of these formulas you're going to see, equations you're going to see in this lesson, are going to be equations based on real quantities that have units. So your answers will need to include those units where they are provided in the question. So quickly recap. We got our formula, we put in our values, and that created an equation for us to solve, which we then solved. And I think this part will not be a problem for any of you. There is a slightly different version of this problem, though, that looks something like this. I don't have any values to substitute in here. I've just got a formula, and I am being told to make y the subject. Well, what does that mean? If you've not come across that language before, that means I want to rearrange this formula so it says y equals something. I don't have a number to substitute in for that x. I just have to work with that x as it is. We already know all the skills we need to solve this question. It's going to be the same as our equation solving, basically. Let's jump in. We've got a plus 3 here. We don't want this plus 3 here. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides of the equation. I'm going to do this in one step, but if it's easier for you guys to do this in 2 steps, feel free to do that. I've got a plus x over here. I don't want it there anymore, so I'm going to subtract x as well. These become 0. Now, even though that's an x, not a number, I can still take away x and move it to the other side of the equation. Now I have this. I still haven't got y by itself, so I'm going to divide by -2. Divide by -2. Divide by -2. Something we touched on this in our previous lesson, but it's very important that you guys are aware here that when we're adding and subtracting on these equations, we just do it once on each side of the equal sign. There's 1 minus 3 here, there's 1 minus 3 here on each side of the equals. When you're timesing something or dividing something, it's actually really important that you times or divide by each individual term. You know, if there were more terms on this side, we would also have to divide them by 2. If we were multiplying, it would be the same way. We would multiply by each individual term. Let's finish off what we've done here. We've cancelled out those -2's. So we're just left with y equals something, and this is where we want it to be. And then -x divided by -2, we're just going to make it positive. We can't actually do anything with it. The same thing over here with the 3/2, we're just going to make it positive because it's a negative divided by a negative. And there we go. We've rearranged that formula to make y the subject without starting by substituting stuff in. The skills we've used are all exactly the same. We've just had an x there that we've had to deal with instead of only dealing with numbers. I'll get you guys to do this one with me. Very simple little equation. X equals 5/y. Want to rearrange it to make y the subject. This is going to be something that's going to happen fairly often. The thing that you want to make the subject of the equation is going to be on the bottom of a fraction. And we're just going to get that guy out of there straight away by multiplying both sides by y. Now we end up with xy equals 5. Now, the reason why I wanted to show you this is because that's going to be something that you're going to have to do quite often. The thing that you want to make the subject of the formula is going to be in there on the bottom of a fraction. And there's no rule that says you can't move that y over to the other side of the equation. Just times both things by y, get it out from underneath that fraction, and then everything else from there becomes much easier to work with. Because now we're just going to divide by x. And I know we haven't done stuff like that before. Previously, when we've done a question like this, there would have been a number out there, and we would have just divided by that number. But what I really want you guys to sort of start to understand through this lesson is that we can treat those x's and those y's exactly the same way we've been treating those numbers. If we need to move them around, we can divide them, we can multiply them, we can add them or subtract them, and move them around in the equation in whatever way we want. So this works out the same way. It would if it was numbers. The x's cancel out, and we're left with 5/x. Let's do now together a slightly more involved example. When you've studied Pythagoras in the past, you've probably just been given by your teacher this version of the formula that has a or b as the subject. We're going to just work through it here together to show you how we come to that version of the formula. We start with just our equation, and we want a by itself as the subject of this formula. So my first step is going to be to get rid of this b squared. I've got plus b squared. I'm just going to subtract it. Now I've got my a by itself, but I've got a squared, which is going to be a bit of a hassle because that means we need to introduce a square root to cancel those out. And we're going to square root that whole other side of the equation. It's going to be really important when you go to put this in your calculator in a second that everything on this side of the equation belongs underneath that square root. So there we go. We have a version of the formula. This is a equals something. And now we're going to grab these numbers that we're given in part B and we're going to plug them in. I'll write it as 6 squared. I was going to write it just as 36, but I'll write it like this and we'll just put it straight into our calculator, exactly like this. Square root of 6 squared minus 4 squared. And it's really important here that you have all of those terms underneath the square root. If you put this in your calculator and it looks like this, and then the minus 4 squared is out like that, that will not give you the right answer. You need your calculator screen to look like this. You need that square root to go the whole way along and include everything in it. Here equals, you get yourself an answer. We're being told to answer to 1 decimal place, so we're going to continue our habit of writing down a bit more than what we need from the calculator and then writing down our answer. All right, guys, I know that's kind of a lot. And doing stuff this way without substituting first is a bit more difficult. And I would encourage you guys to, where possible, do the substitution first. For example, in this question, I think it becomes a lot easier if we start here. I think you guys will find this a lot easier to answer than doing this rearranging without any numbers. But when you come down here to practice, you'll notice there's quite a lot of work assigned for today. This exercise, the questions specifically get you to substitute first, and then this exercise is all about rearranging without substitution. Remember, guys, I don't need you to do the whole of every question. Just pick a couple of parts of each question, check that you've done them correctly, and then move on. Don't get bogged down in doing full questions because you'll be here for hours. I want you to just do a couple of parts of each one and then move on. Even less than usual today, to be honest, because you have so many to get through. Even if you only do 2 or 3 parts to each question, I'd be happy with that, as long as you're getting them right before you move on. Take yourself a little break in the middle, but don't let the break be too long. I will be around on email if you want to send through any questions. I'll do my best to help. Yeah, you guys can get into that. Thanks, everybody.